All right, guys. Today on the podcast, we have Jace Allen. He spent 20 days down in Kentucky hunting public land after a deer.
And killed an absolute giant.
He did. So we want to talk to him a little bit today about how he was able to do that and get some background on the deer and the story. So, Jace, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, my name's Jace Allen. I was born in Bonne Missouri. Been hunting with my dad ever since I was a kid. He used to, carry me out in the woods whenever I couldn't walk, or else I'd just fuss there around the house. And I actually started going out on my own whenever I was 15, and that's when I shot my first deer with a bow. So here we are. I'm 27 years old. Today, I'm self-employed. I'm just kind of doing a whole array of things. I don't really have one thing that I'm too zoned in on yet. Still trying to figure out what I do whenever I grow up.
You're a deer hunter. That's what you're going to do.
I mean, that's whatever I can do to let me go deer hunting more. That's what I'm concerned with. Still trying to figure it out, but we're getting there.
When you said you were 27, I think my jaw hit the ground. Not saying that you look old, but the resume that you have from, like, I was creeping on your Instagram and I'm 27 and I'm just like, this dude's got some giants. Like that impressed me a lot when you just said you were 27 years old. So I'm going to sit back and listen to this one. Let's where can people find you on social media, stuff like that, real quick?
Just Facebook, Jace Allen, first and last name, and then Instagram handle is Nature of the Beast. Those are the two platforms I'm most active on.
Cool.
And we'll link those down in the description of the podcast too, for anybody that wants to follow you and follow your stories. So,
wait.
Any other questions that you guys have for him before we get into this giant public land Kentucky deer?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Not until we get into it a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So let's talk about my first question that I have, and then you guys can bounce ideas, if you have any as well. But my first question is, you live in Missouri, correct?
Yes.
So, and don't get into details on, obviously I don't want to know where the deer was. I don't want our viewers or listening to know where the deer was. I don't want to give away your hunting spots. But I am curious, how did you locate the deer, especially a deer of that caliber? Was it, I don't want to say 100%. I don't want to say it was luck. Obviously, you put the time in to kill this deer, but what did you do in order to find a deer of that caliber on public?
So this was a little different kind of a deal. I usually hunt, by myself, and do all that. I enjoy hunting by myself, but there's this guy, his name was Eric, and he's been down there hunting in Kentucky for like the last 2 years or something. I just know him from social media, and he sent me a picture of this deer and another deer that he had on trail camera down there. And so basically he gave me a lead on these deer.
Wow, dude, you better give that boy a big old handshake or something, because
Applebee's gift card or something.
Yeah,
right. But yeah, he gave me a lead on these deer, and so that's how I got there in the first place, because I had been to Kentucky once before. I don't know, it was like 10 years ago. So this was the second time I've ever stepped foot in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Oh my!
And it's like, how far is Kentucky from where you're living?
From where I'm living, it's like 6 or so hours.
Okay, so you had a bit of a drive. Yeah. I mean, it's not like you just.
Yeah, it was a little bit of drive. I mean, it was definitely too far for me to want to like go there and do like summer scouting of my own.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha.
Let's see. Sorry, I forgot what I was asked.
No, we were just talking about how you found the deer, and you told us that your buddy sent you a picture.
Yeah. So that's how this all got started. He was asking me like a year prior to go down there, but I like just started going on my first out of state hunt, kind of getting comfortable with that, and wasn't really comfortable like just completely taking off to another state. And plus at that time I didn't really have the time to spend down there, not at least the amount of time that I wanted.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a curious person, and I'm gonna ask the question everybody's dying to know before we go any farther. What did that deer tape?
Oh man, do you guys want to guess?
I'm gonna pull up your. I'm gonna look at the Instagram again. I'm gonna say that deer went. I'm gonna say high 80s, low 90s. Maybe?
That's what people guess on that deer. So he's got a 21 and a 22-inch main beam sitting on a 16-inch spread. Gross Boone and Crockett score of 182.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. So, I mean, still a giant.
That's a giant, yeah. Public land deer, that's awesome.
Oh, yeah, it was phenomenal.
Yeah, dude. I'm looking at your picture right now. I'm just, like, so jealous. That thing's a tank.
And I was telling Matt here when we were eating that thing looks like a Texas deer. Like, just the frame structure of it kind of resembles a Texas deer. But
kind of like,
it's a very sweet deer.
He definitely has the tine length over the mass, and that's like, it definitely makes him look kind of like a Texas deer for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and the deer was only like 140 pounds also.
Wow.
Really?
That makes that rack even more impressive.
That's probably why the deer looks that much bigger.
Yeah.
Because, like, when you said 182, I was like, man, I just imagined it to be a lot bigger than that.
I was looking at it, I was like, that thing's probably close to 200.
Yeah.
I thought, but that makes sense. It's
I've gotten that one too. I mean, a small body and a good camera.
Yeah.
Decent antlers. That's perfect for Instagram.
Yeah, you definitely.
Ask your buddy. It's like, hey, make this thing look 200. Like,
and to be honest, that first picture on your Instagram is you're not sticking your arm out at all. So.
Kudos to the old boy that took your photo, because that deer's he looks good. So I'm going to kind of bounce off of that a little bit. You said that, maybe he had, 140 pounds on the hoof. Do you think that deer was a very old deer? Or do you think...
it was kind of hard to say. I mean, the locals around this area, I kind of got in with them a little bit just because I was down there so long, and people started, stopping and talking to me.
Yeah.
Just because they were like, "Hey, you've been here for a while. What are you doing? What are you doing?
Why are you here?
Why are you here?" I know that there was a shed picked up off that deer last year, and it looked like the one side was like a typical 10-pointer. So, I mean, if you consider a deer, it's recognizable 3 years old, he's at least 4.
Yeah,
but I can tell you this much: I'm used to where I'm at, like looking at tracks, on the ground. I'm used to like a 3 for my hand, like a 3 1/4 to 3 1/2 finger buck track. Like that's big here. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know how long down there, and the biggest track that I found was a 3-finger track. And I was just like, well, I guess I'm just like finding doe tracks. I don't know what the heck's going on. The buck that I shot, his track was like 2.5 fingers. And then my buddy Hunter, who took those pictures, he shot a buck down there, and it was like 2 3/4. So it was like a 3-finger track down there. It seemed like it was a hammer.
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
So they definitely had some small hooves down there.
Yeah, I know. It's so, different from what I'm used to. But after, getting a couple deer on the ground and, looking them over, it was just like, man, a 3-finger track is, I guess, big around here. That's interesting. Not for a lack of rack, just lack of foot.
Yeah.
So was there a lot of ag around you, or like more hardwoods? Like, because around here, a bigger track would be like what you're describing by your area, but we also have a lot of ag.
Yeah, farmland. Yeah.
And I've noticed where there's not as much ag, it just seems like the hoof size isn't quite as big. And it can be deceiving on the size of the deer then, too.
Right. See, this was ag land, and I don't know if the deer's bodies are just smaller. I mean, like I said, I'm unfamiliar with Kentucky.
Right.
Yeah.
I hunt some hill country in Missouri, and I don't take tracks into consideration at all because it's more like a chert or like a flint type, like soil type, and so their feet just get ground down. So it's just like trying to gauge a foot size, to body size of deer. It doesn't make sense there.
Yep. Well, we hunt a little bit of northern Kentucky, and I feel like the deer in northern Kentucky, basically like an hour over the river, the Ohio River, I feel like they're pretty similar size to what we're used to.
Yeah.
So it's funny how you go from one side of the state to the other, vice versa, and deer change. But so I guess the big question that I have is, did you hunt that deer 20 days straight, or like just get into that a little bit, or the 20-day process of hunting him? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I guess so this was a tale of two deer is what was going on here. Let's see. So like I said, before I went down there, I knew what property it was going to be on. I didn't have any details about the property, so I didn't do like any e-scouting or anything like that beforehand. I wanted to get down there and actually lay eyes on the property first, and then start doing my e-scouting whenever I actually knew what it was that I was looking at.
Yeah.
So let's see. The guy that gave me the lead, he was hunting this deer for like the first couple of days, and he wanted me to come on over there and hunt the deer with him. But whenever I, start out on a new property, I need to find, a general pattern. I need to figure out what these deer are doing in general. So I took the first day or two, and I just drove around and just, seeing what's what, who's hunting where, kind of what the general hunting pressure is looking like. Not that it really ended up mattering that much, but just more trying to get an idea of what deer and mature bucks are doing. And so it was day 3. Like I said, there is a lot of ag in this area. I was setting up on an observation post, and I saw this buck pop his head out of or stand up in the soybeans, and all I could see was like his head and his antlers. And he was laying right next to my car where I'd walked in. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it's the same thing that I'm getting in Missouri, which is, the mature bucks are not around trees, basically.
Yep.
It was just like, okay. I've dealt with this before here in Missouri. So from there, I figured, they're standing corn. I scouted, a couple different cornfields. I know there's deer living in the corn. But kind of what I didn't really expect was all the deer that I'd found that were bedding in the beans. So I guess here, let me back up for a second. So that was day 3 that I started to catch on to this this pattern that deer were bedding in these beans.
Yeah.
And I will say, so this must have been like a very particular situation between talking to the locals and also just driving around the whole area in general and looking at all the beans. These beans were tall enough to where deer could like bed in it and feel safe.
Yep.
So like,
we're familiar.
Say what?
I said we're familiar with that. Yeah, tall
familiar
beans.
With that?
Yeah.
I haven't experienced this in Missouri. Like I'm used to like deer like bedding, like somewhere else and moving to the beans.
Yep.
I wasn't expecting these deer to be bedding in the beans, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yep.
So day 3, I started to figure that out. Day 4 is when I finally headed over to that area that these 2 bucks were living in. So I guess to start out, I hadn't looked at, I had drove through this area one time. This area that I ended up hunting, I stayed in like a 300-acre section for the next 17 days. And what I saw was just absolutely just mind-blowing, miraculous, whatever you want to call it. What the kind of things that I got to watch these deer do whenever they're in a place that they feel safe under a pressured situation, watching how these deer move. Mature bucks move under those conditions, and living right next to the road, basically, where everybody was just blowing by them and looking out in the soybean field, not seeing anything, and just driving on by. Anywhere from that to watching, some of these bucks, had stalks put on them, and you see the deer bump up, and every single one that I saw, if it was a decently mature buck, they made this big, loop and ended up right behind the guy that was, stalking them. It was
that's awesome.
They're smart. That's why they're big.
Yeah, I mean, you can listen, podcast after podcast after podcast, but until you actually, hear a million stories, until you actually go out there and see these kind of things, it's not going to really resonate. So, knowing that I kind of had this, this bean pattern in mind, I had picked a spot that, it was right in between three roads. It was a soybean field, and I had a nice little glassing spot. And I set up there. Let's see, it was day 4. I set up there in the evening, and I had this 125-inch 8-pointer stand up, out in front of me. I'm like, oh, that's cool, and that's all I saw. And I was like, okay, well, I'll set this again tomorrow morning and, see what's up in here during daylight. And I got there at daylight and I didn't see any deer. I was like, well, that's interesting. I figured, I would have caught something on its feet. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to sit here. And so I sit there, and it's daylight, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30. It's 9:30 rolls around. And then all of a sudden, 2 bucks stand up that have not stood up all morning.
When most guys are going, when they're leaving their stand and they're blind to go get breakfast.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna sit here for a little while longer. And those deer, they bedded down, and then 2 to 2.5 hours later, they got up again, and they moved around a little bit, and then they laid right back down. I was like, well, this is pretty cool to watch. I was like, I'm just gonna keep on doing this, because I was like, because this is something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And I'm watching, I'm right back on the same spot that evening, and I watch, and one of these bucks, it's that that 3-year-old 125-inch 8-pointer. It's a half hour before dark. This deer stands up, feeds around for 5 minutes or so, and then lays back down until after dark. I'm like, really? This is getting interesting. So I watched this for the next couple of days. I'm seeing deer, get up mid-morning. Eventually I had come to the conclusion that they were moving for 2 reasons. One, sunlight, and the second, wind. And I guess to get on the what I really learned from seeing this is I didn't realize this, and I talked about it with other people, is that mature bucks, they don't move they don't move every evening. And that was something that was interesting to learn while I was down there. And I almost wish I didn't know this, because now that I'm back in Missouri and I am working again, it's kind of depressing. But the best time that I saw to be out in the woods was somewhere between 8:30 and 10:30 in the morning. Every single day, these bucks that I was watching, they would get up and do some sort of a shift, and bed down in a new spot.
Do you think that's from the day winds picking up?
I'm not sure what it is. I think it's a combination between the day winds picking up and then moving bed position because of that, and I think because that sun gets up in the sky, and because they're in the height of cover that they're in, if it gets straight overhead, they're kind of in an open spot. Their initial bed that they laid down, whenever that sun starts hitting them, they're like, oh, screw this, I'm gonna go sit in the shade. And I don't blame them. It was like 96, 97 degrees.
Yeah.
Some
That
of
makes
those days.
sense. That makes sense.
So besides those lessons that I had learned, I was sitting there. Let's see, it gets to day. So I sat that platform for 3 days, and the fourth day I went back. I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch this one more time. Then I'm, because this is kind of fun. I'm gonna watch this one more time. Then I'm gonna start, watching something else. And the fourth day I was there, all of a sudden, one of these 2 deer that we were hunting stands up out of the soybeans, and I'm like, holy cow. Now we're talking. Let's see.
So was it the one that you killed, or was it the other one that you were hunting that stood up first?
This was the other one that I was hunting.
Gotcha.
Actually, sorry, I keep on bouncing forward. I need to back up again.
You're all right.
So during these first 3 days of season that I'm trying to get things figured out, this buck that I end up killing, he got bumped twice and moved bedding areas. There's a little island right next to the corn, and he got bumped out of that island twice. He moved to the beans, and third day of season, this deer got shot by another hunter, and they had blood. They came in. They had a dog. They tracked that dog for 2 nights. Didn't come up with anything.
I bet they did.
Yeah, I would have tracked that dog for 2 nights.
Yeah, no, I don't blame them. What was crazy is the guy that invited me down there. We saw this deer come through on the trail camera. It was late at night or whatever, after dark. And this was the second night, and then it wasn't, I don't know how long it was afterwards. Those guys came through with the dog, and so we were able to call and be like, hey, that deer's still alive. And so after that, everybody was, all hands on deck, hunting again.
So where did he hit him?
Let's see. Well, I can tell you now. I was going to tell you at the end.
Well, if it saves for a good story, save it.
All right, I'll tell you at the end.
Okay.
Because it's pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, save it.
So with this other deer, so this was the fourth day that I had sat these beans, and finally he showed up. Let's see, there was another guy there that had got there around the same time. He was leaving that day. I forget what state he was from, but he had ended up seeing this bigger deer too. And so he was like, hey, I'm leaving today. I really want to put a stock on this thing. And I'm just very begrudgingly okay. It's do what you got to do. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you or nothing. I'm just going to sit here and I'm just going to watch.
That's a smart move, honestly.
Well, the guy, I knew there was no chance of this guy getting a shot at this deer because literally,
just go for it.
Well, I mean, yeah, go for it. I mean, that's you have to.
Yeah, you don't have a choice when you're leaving.
Well, this deer he's literally, whenever he's standing up, his main beams and his tines are sticking out of the soybeans, and that's it. It's just how are you expecting you're going to get a shot at this
Yeah, because the beans were so tall. Yeah.
Yeah, because the beans were so tall. So he ended up getting really close to the deer. I mean, it was nerve-wracking watching because I was like, oh, man, he's getting close. But he ended up bumping the deer, and then I got on the deer that day, and I managed to get ahead of the deer, and I was sitting at like 40 yards forever, and then 11 o'clock hit, and this deer stood up, and he moved beds like maybe, no, he didn't actually. He just moved like 20 or 30 yards away from me, and I had already been sitting on this deer here for a couple hours, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a move, try to get, a little bit closer, within my comfortable range. And I did, and I knew I was close, but I had this while I was sitting there, less than 20 yards away from this deer, bedded in the beans, I had this whole moral dilemma of, how am I even going to shoot this thing? I was like, am I going to shoot this deer in the neck, or am I just going to guess and shoot through the beans?
So what could you see at 20 yards? What was visible?
So at that time, nothing, because he was bedded down. But whenever that deer stood up, all I could see was his neck and his head, and he did this all in one motion. He stood up, looked at me, and then blew and took off. And I was just like, okay, well, that was I should have just backed out, because I knew I wasn't going to get any bit of an ethical shot. But I mean, that deer, he was not small, by any means.
I was going to ask you, what did you guesstimate this deer that you were chasing to be for size?
This other one, he was probably right around the 170 mark.
Wow.
He might have been high 60s. It's kind of hard to say. He was like a mainframe 11.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Really long G4s. So, let's see what else had happened. So I guess to kind of, let's see. So over the next, let's see. So that was like the fourth, or no, that was like 7th day season. It's somewhere between there and day 17. And this whole time this buck was coming out into the beans and bedding in the beans once every 4 days.
Really?
Yep. The other 3 days he was bedding and living in the corn.
Sure.
Gotcha.
And so, I don't have any trail cameras myself, and honestly it wouldn't have helped me at all, with this situation. But basically my day in and day out on these deer was I would get to my glassing spot, at daylight, and then I would sit there until 11 o'clock. That way, just in case I missed something whenever it stood up the first time, I could catch it, whenever it stood up again. Right around 11, it seemed like every day the deer would stand up again for just a split second. And then it seems like after that they were laid down for a long time until something like mid-evening, or if they did get up and do an evening movement. But over those days, I had 4 separate encounters with this buck, and I was within bow range of this deer for 15 plus hours.
Oh
my gosh!
I never had a clear shot at this deer.
Just because of the beans.
Just because of the beans. This buck never got out of any beans that he was less than eyeball deep in. If he could see out of the beans, he felt like he was in danger.
I believe it.
So the last opportunity that I had on this deer, it was just a weekday. I had seen this deer get up at 8:30 or something in the morning, and I moved in. I thought I was pretty close to where he was, but the wind was not that great that day, so I had to sit back a little bit. He got back up at 11, and I sat there until it got to 6:30 that evening. So I was sitting in the beans all day on this deer. because I had seen him bed once here before, and he crossed a ditch that was out in these beans that I could actually, like, shoot in.
Yeah.
So that was my whole evening plan. I was like, okay, if this deer does his evening movement like he did the other day, he's going to cross this ditch. Whenever he starts moving, I'm gonna be moving, kind of slide my wind right by him, and I'm gonna shoot him right as soon as he gets in this ditch.
Wow.
So,
well, that didn't happen. There was 3 guys that were locals, and I don't know if they saw me or if they saw the deer, like, while I was down, ducking these other guys that were driving around. But at 6:30 in the evening, all of a sudden I had 3 guys waiting in on me, sitting on this deer. And
they were walking through the beans.
Say what?
They were walking in the beans towards you?
Yeah, well, they had seen the deer, and so they were walking, they were stalking into the beans. Completely wrong wind direction. That's, besides the point.
But it's always classic dudes like that just ruin your, like, they don't have any clue what's going on.
I've been watching this deer for 18 days, and you just have some dudes walking through
some random dude just, let's go get him, boys.
Let's go get him. Well, I stood up so they could see me, and I saw 2 of them. I didn't even know there was a 3rd one there till later. But
he was the best one then.
Right? I saw 2 of them. I looked at them, and they looked at me, and then looked at each other, and looked down, and went back to stalking. So I was like, "Wow, really? This is fun."
A little public land.
So, hey, Jace. So, were you hunting on the ground throughout this whole situation?
So kind of half and half. Oh, sorry, I didn't explain what my whole day was. So, so in the mornings I would sit from daylight to 11 o'clock to see if that other deer was in the beans, and if he wasn't, my other option was okay, this deer and the other deer that I'm hunting are both in the corn, and every single evening I hunted in or around the corn. Specifically hunting for this other deer because I had a pretty good idea of where he was in the corn, and there was this water hole on one side of it that I made a bunch of sits on, and I could have shot a bunch of deer, coming out of this bedding area that was in the corn, coming to that water hole, but it just was never, that big guy just never made it to me in time. So, hunting for that, that deer every day in the evenings is how it was going. So basically, hunt for number 2 in the morning and then number 1 in the evening. That was my daily thing. Let's see. Sorry, I got lost again.
No, you're all right.
It's a lot to go over.
you were just in the middle of telling us that those 3 guys were coming through the beans.
Oh, yeah. So these 3 guys are coming through the beans, and so they're, coming at the deer. I can't even see the deer. It's laying down. So they're moving in on the deer. So I was like, well, I'm not just going to sit here. So I'm going to, start moving towards where I think this buck's going to bump out to. And I start to make my move. And so I'm starting to move, and so they move quicker than I move quicker, and they move even quicker, and then they, end up busting the deer out, and it comes, charging by me at, 40 yards, and I just watch him, go run in the corn, and I'm just like, wow. So let's see. After that, I think that was I don't remember what day that was. But I think you had talked to me earlier. You were going to ask me about like some of the like mental struggles while going through all this.
Yeah.
Was that right?
No, yeah. We had a couple topics that we wanted to cover. I think that was your topic, Kevin. So go ahead and touch base on that.
So how did you stay mentally focused? I mean, I know you're chasing now. I know that you're chasing 2 big deer,
2 booners.
But how do you stay mentally focused for this amount of time? And it sounds like the hunting pressure was kind of high on these deer because you had some people from out of state after them and some locals for sure after them. So it sounds like
just those locals. Like there was 3 other people that were hunting on the public where these were and the private bordering So there was a lot of guys after these deer.
So if you had to take a dart and throw it in the board, how many people were hunting this deer? How many people knew about this deer while you were hunting him?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I guess I was the 9th person.
Lucky number 9.
Yeah, lucky number 9.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, actually, no, sorry, 10th. I just thought it was somebody else.
Wow.
Yeah.
So with the 10 people, including yourself, that was hunting these 2 deer, going back to the question, how did you stay mentally sane? How did you not just pack up camp and say, you know what, boys, I had a good run, I'm going home?
Well, so this is the first time I've ever hunted this long. The hardest days mentally for me were days 14, 15, and 16. Couldn't tell you why. But the whole thing I was telling myself is while I'm out here, I'm kind of guilty of this as well. I know, other people, experience some of the same things, but as far as getting burnt out, it's there's, and I think this actually helped me in Kentucky, not knowing what else was out there, not having gone in the spring and just found spots in the woods and whatnot where I could be hunting. Those are some things that are going through your head. That's something I'm dealing with in Missouri right now. Basically, I really want to, it takes all of me to not want to go bounce around and, go find, other deer. Cause I had other deer, located from the first 3 days that, on any given, other out of state hunt would have been a shooter. But whenever I started having those thoughts, it just came to mind. I was just okay, this is what separates the people that are going to, the guy that is going to get this deer and the people that are not going to get this deer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I just kept on telling myself the whole time, I was stay the course. I was that's what I was telling myself through those days, even though, no matter how bad, I love scouting, I love going.
Obviously.
I wanted to go look at, other stuff and hunt other things and, other sets that I was, excited about, something that I'd maybe seen on the map. I was ooh, that looks like a good spot. I'll go hunt it one day.
Yeah.
All those things that I wanted to do, I couldn't do any of those things because it would just take away from, my focus, towards these deer. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Part of, I don't know if this is going to happen every time I'm on a 20-day hunt, but the grind got, so real during those couple of days. I mean, I'm talking like real man tears, were coming out.
No,
I love that. That's
dude,
great.
honestly, I respect the heck out of that.
Just the frustration.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, so, as far as, that, I was, starting to get teared up, whenever it got to, day 10. And I had still, not shot this deer. I had, gotten within range of it twice, and I wanted it so bad that I was in tears. But whenever we got to day 14, 15, 16, 17, I was oh, this is not I want to, I don't even know what this is now. It's something new that I'd never experienced before.
You're in the grieving process. You're past the tears part. You're later into the grieving process.
Yeah, right. But after day 16, I think whenever day 17 hit, I had decided that there was no way that I was going to leave without one of these deer, leaving with me.
That was honestly, that was going to be my next question, was what was going to be the limit?
Yes.
When were you going to draw the line if you had thought about that?
I don't think he was going to.
Well,
he'd still be out in the beans right now.
No kidding. So it's, some of those days it's just like, oh man, I've been out here for a while, Missouri's opening up, and, part of getting burnt out is like allowing yourself to think about quitting.
Yep.
It's like that's, and I realize not, it takes a very special situation to just be able okay, I'm staying until the job's done. But whenever I woke up that morning and I was like, I'm leaving with one of these deer, no matter what, all of a sudden I was fine.
Your mindset
just
changed.
The thought of going home without the deer, the thought of going somewhere else and hunting somewhere else, and wondering what the hell was going on there, that was out of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I'm hunting this area and there's nowhere else I'm going to hunt, there's nothing else I'm going to think about, and I'm going to leave with one of these deer. And whenever I got that thought across to my brain, all of a sudden everything was peachy, everything was fine. So I had a couple day breakdown there, but yeah, like I said, after that, whenever my mind kind of knew that it's okay, we're in this, there's no quitting, there's no giving up at this point.
Yeah.
It was actually a lot more enjoyable for me at that point.
That's a unique story. For deer hunters,
I mean,
that's elk hunters. I could see that kind of story
backpacking, yeah.
But not somebody hunting a whitetail.
Eastern whitetail.
That's unique,
dude,
for sure.
Yeah, a lot of respect gained from listening to you in the last. I mean, that's insane.
Most guys are 3 days tops. So
most guys that take a rutcation, you know, for a week plus a weekend or so,
they usually take the last day off because they're tired.
Well, that or if they have some bad weather or something, they just check out because they're well, I got another day, or I'm burnt out, I'm not seeing anything. But 17 days that's a grind, man.
That's mental. That's strong mentally.
You've gone past what most of the guys would go through anyway.
99% of the hunters would not have done that.
Yeah.
Brother, I'm telling you what, I was pulling new cookies out of the cookie jar. I didn't even know those were in there.
They were moldy and expired.
That's what kept you going, was them funky cookies.
Oh, that's good.
So, let's get in, unless you have any other questions, Kevin. Let's get into the kill. So, day 17. Let's get into the next couple days on what you did to make that final transition to kill this deer.
All right, so like I said, that deer had got shot the third day of season, and there had been trail camera pictures taken of that deer up until the 11th of September. I think I ended up killing on the 22nd or something. So I think it was, like I said, day 17, 18 rolls around, and I'm doing my usual morning thing. I'm sitting there. It's the fourth day. I'm sitting back on these beans. And by the way, this buck, every day he's been in the beans, he's got bumped out by somebody, and he just keeps on coming back. Well, the fourth time, whenever, those three guys and me were all circling this deer, it made me a little bit nervous, but I was like, I'm staying the course. I'm going to do the same thing, I've been doing here. So I sat there that morning. It got to 11 o'clock, and in this midst, I had passed up a 150-inch 8-pointer.
Wow. Sounds like I know a guy that did the same thing, but he didn't know it was 150 inches. I'm sitting next to him. He's like, but he wasn't chasing a 180. Well, yeah, you were. Never mind. Anyway, it's just you sound crazy for doing that, but yeah.
So there was one morning the whole time I was there that at daylight there was a mature buck up on its feet. It was foggy. I couldn't tell what deer it was because, honestly, this 8-pointer and this other deer I was chasing around, at a distance, you couldn't tell them apart because their cages were the same size.
Wow.
So I had seen this deer out in the beans, and finally, I had found a buck that was actually in a good spot to make a stalk on him, and like in a spot to where whenever this deer stood up, somewhere around that 8:30, 9 o'clock, whatever marker. I was actually going to get a shot at this deer. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if it's this 8-pointer. I don't know if it's this other deer, but I'm going. So I went ahead, I put the stalk on that deer. He got up, it was like 40 yards, and which is right at the edge of my comfortable range. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that went through my head was, oh man, it's not, the one I'm chasing. Yeah. And I watched him. He walked a couple steps and he laid back down. I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna go back to my vehicle. And then for the rest of that day, I had this whole moral dilemma of should I go shoot this 150-inch 8-pointer?
Yeah.
But I was like, nope, we're staying the course.
Good for you.
So that day, it got to 11 o'clock, and that deer wasn't out there, but it was the fourth day. I just knew that deer was somewhere out in the beans. There was other parts of the beans that I couldn't see, that I wasn't viewing. So I hopped in my car and I go drive around, because I'm like, I wonder if I should stay here for a couple more hours and like put eyes on these other beans just to see if he's out here. And I drive around, and one of the local guys that I know from the area, he's walking back to his truck. I can see him from a distance out, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what he's doing. And so I go over there, and it's like 11:10, and I go up to him, and he's all adrenalined up, bug-eyed out, and I'm just like, what happened? And he's just like, man, I just shot that big 11-pointer. And I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. So come to find out, that night, brought the dog in, couldn't find anything with the dog, or no blood, couldn't find the arrow, couldn't find anything. So I spent a whole day thinking that deer was dead and didn't know where this other one was. And then at like 2 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden the deer's still alive, so game on again. And I'm just like, okay, well, I've seen these deer get bumped out of these soybeans a million times, and they keep on coming right back. So there was the original island of trees that really big buck had gotten bumped out of, and I was just like, you know what? Just in case, I was like, because there hadn't been anybody in there in a while. I was like, just in case, I'm going to slide up here on this island to where I can shoot any deer that are coming into this island to bed in the morning, if that was going to be a thing. But I also left a lane that I could view out into the beans, and it was a new lane. So let's see, that guy, shot that deer. So the next day, I go in, scout that, hang up my tree stand, whatnot. I'm getting ready for the next morning because we have a cold front rolling in. And I get in my stand the next morning, cold front's rolling in, and I got does freaking frolicking all around. They're jumping up and down. They're happy. It's cooling off. And 7:30 in the morning, I look out in my one lane going out into the beans. It wasn't probably but 150 yards from where that guy had shot that deer just 2 days. That other deer 2 days prior. And I look out in the beans and I see a freaking cage sticking up, and I'm like, that's him. That's my big 11-pointer. And I put the glass on him, and I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, that is the buck that we call crabs. I was like, and he's in a good position to stalk. And I fly out of my tree, and I go and I run back to my car. Stand on top of my car for probably 10 or 15 minutes and get a good wind direction. I had marked, made some mental notes about where this deer was out in the beans, and I had my wind direction, and so I drove around, and this buck was bedding about 70 yards off the road in the beans. And so all I had to do was walk about 40 yards into the beans, hit a row, and there was a bunch of wind that day. Strong north wind. You guys know how cold fronts are.
Yep.
So I'd stalked like 40 yards in the beans and 30 yards over, and I thought that was going to put me like within 40 yards of this buck. And whenever I sat down and got all set up, it was 8:30 in the morning, and I was like, all right. I was like, this deer, if he's done anything like any other mature buck that I've seen this entire time I've been here, he's going to stand up at 11. I was like, and that's going to be my opportunity. So, I get there 8:30, 9:30, 10:30 comes by. It's like 10:58, and I look down at my phone, and I'm like, I'm still sitting there. I'm on one knee the whole time, so I can see, above the beans.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, I'm looking out in the direction that I'm thinking this buck's going to stand up in. And then I'm sitting there, I'm staring, and then all of a sudden, just like out of nowhere, I just notice a new shape over to my right. And I look, and 29 yards away to my right, this buck just stood up. And
dude, oh my.
That's so close.
Right.
From 8:30 to 11, dude, you must have been quiet. That is wild. He was only 30 yards away.
It's kind of crazy. You can actually get away with like more sound
whenever the wind, when the beans were blowing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You can get away with more sound than what you think.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's something I see some people do sometimes. Is that you have to pick like a good, like whenever you are doing a stalk on a deer, you have to pick a good medium between quiet and fast, because sound is obviously going to get a deer's attention, but if it sees you, then you're done for sure. Yeah. So I would rather get to my spot and get like down out of sight before this deer stands up and then sees me, rather than go slow, not be heard, but be standing up for more time for this deer, also stand up and see me standing there. So getting to my spot, I wasn't that slow. Like, I don't know if I could put a speed on it or something, but I mean, I got there fairly, what I would call fairly quick. Yeah. Like I said, set up, he stood up, and I can tell where he was at. He was standing, like his whole body, he was standing in the open, just like I had seen from, my observation stand. But from my angle, there was beans in between me and this deer. So what I did was I waited for this buck. He stood up, looked around for danger for, a minute or two, and then he put his head back down and he started feeding. And then that's when I stood up and I drew my bow. And honestly, all I could really see was like the top of the deer's back, and then obviously, whenever the deer was standing, head upright, then I could see, the neck and the head. Mm-hmm. So this kind of comes back to this whole moral dilemma of like, what do you do, with this situation? Because shooting them in the body, isn't, you can't see what you're shooting at, with some of these deer, so you have to make a decision. I'm not about to shoot a deer in the neck. Mm-hmm. So what I'm going to do, or what I did was I stood there while this buck was standing there feeding, head down. I stood there for about a minute at full draw.
Nice.
And this deer, finally, it poked its head all the way up, and so it's standing upright, and I knew, if anything, I did not want to be close to the shoulder. Mm-hmm. I was like, if anything, I want to shoot this deer more towards middle of the body, and it's better to be low than high. Yeah. So I went to where, I thought the shoulder was, brought my pin down kind of towards the middle of the body, and I took my shot. Mm-hmm. And I heard it hit a couple bean stalks, and then I heard it impact the deer. And he took off running, and I got the binos on him. I'm looking, I don't see a hole or nothing, and he stops, and he's all hunched up out there. And I was like, okay, I know I hit this deer. I was like, it seems like I hit him. Like, all right, but I'm going to do everything I can to put another arrow in this deer. So
smart.
like earlier, what's that?
I said that's smart. I like that.
Yeah. So like my normal comfortable shooting range is like 40 yards and in. Although I have my bow and I have the capabilities, you know, set up to shoot out to 100 yards.
Sure.
Just for like specifically this situation, if I have a deer that has an arrow in it and he's less than 100 yards, I am going to fire another arrow.
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
absolutely.
So this deer stops. He's quartered away out there. He's quartered away pretty hard. I range him at 63, dial my sight in, and stand back, you know, draw my bow, stand back up. And, I mean, I just absolutely pounded him that time.
Nice. That's awesome.
Dude, that's sweet.
That's great.
I didn't see him fall, but he ran, his, like, mouth was open, his tongue was hanging out, and he ran into, like, a little, you know, a little patch of CRP, and then that's when I just absolutely lost my mind.
I bet.
I was calm all the way up until that point whenever I saw him going to the CRP, but whenever I saw that second arrow hit him, and I saw, you know, the way he was acting, I was just like, that buck is mine.
It's better to be shaking then than when you're at full draw.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's the best situation you can have on a deer.
Right.
That's awesome.
You talk about, you know, like all the adrenaline from that whole...
You've been saving it for 17 days.
20 days.
Yeah, 20 days, and jeez.
It hit me all at once, and I'm telling you what, it hit me like a freaking freight train.
I couldn't even imagine that adrenaline rush that you went through.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I can't even explain it, but no, I was gonna give the deer a little bit of time, but I just texted my buddies that, you know, I told them what was going on. They're like, "Well, go ahead and get your deer." I was like, I need to give a little bit of time. They're like, "Well, you pounded them, right?" I was like, "Well, yeah." They're like, "Well, go get them." I was like, I
want to bump them.
After 45 minutes. I went up there to the edge of the CRP, and he was laying 10 yards inside the CRP.
Dude,
that's awesome.
Right there.
Dude, that's
awesome.
That's sweet. Wild.
So that deer had 3 arrows in him at one. By the end of the day, he had 3 arrows in him.
So where did he get hit? Yeah.
So that first shot, that deer was in velvet, and he got hit in the rack.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, his left G2 has a broadhead blade mark in it. And those guys had blood from that.
From his antler.
From an antler. That dog had tracked that deer for 2 days just on that hit.
Oh my gosh.
That's a good dog.
That's a real good dog.
No, that dog was like for real.
Bloodhound
I
for
see
sure.
it.
Wow.
I think I see it. You said his left what? His left
G2.
His left G2. I don't know if it would be anywhere in the pictures, but it's that split tine. It's basically what would be like his mainframe G2. It's on the backside.
Gotcha.
I don't think I posted any pictures of it.
No, I was looking at your Instagram and I couldn't tell, but I believe you.
We believe you. That's wild,
dude.
Man.
That is nuts.
That's crazy.
Like that is
great story.
That is honestly one of the craziest whitetail stories that I have ever heard.
Mm-hmm.
Like just from start to finish, that is insane.
Yeah. So one thing that I think sets you apart is you seem to do more scouting, and you stayed through there, like through the dead part of the day when most people would get up and leave. You sat there and patterned these deer. You were able to watch other people go in there and spot and stalk, and how the deer would come back, circle back to where they were.
Yeah, backtrack.
And you took all that into account for your game plan then in the end and stuff too. I think that really helped.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those first 3 days that I was in that general area, I had watched, it was like four or five different people stalk, like, one deer cut. Well, I guess it was like no, it was 3 different bucks. And I was just playing watcher, and I realized how fun it was and how much more information I got from just watching.
Yep.
And it was really cool to see different people and different styles of stalking and seeing, and kind of, because I've never stalked in beans that are like that. The one out of state guy that put a stalk on that other one I was after, he had a completely different way of going about things. I wouldn't even have thought what he was doing would even be possible. It's like, it's just freaking crazy. And then my buddy, my roommate Hunter, he came down there, and he actually after he shot his deer, the next day he went on a stalk with me for this other deer I was chasing after, and kind of getting to see what he did differently. That was really cool to see and learn also. And to take what I had seen out there, and then take what I had seen other people do, and then take what I know, and to kind of mix that all together, and for it all to come together in the end. And I'm not gonna say I called my shot, but I had a good idea of what that deer was going to do and when I was going to have my opportunity before I even put a stalk on that deer.
Right.
And that was really cool, getting to watch, those things, consistent day in and day out, for another mature buck to do that same thing, which was get up sometime in the morning and then get up again, at 11 o'clock, and just mill around for a couple minutes.
Yeah, well, I find most impressive is like I've been in trouble because I'd be looking at TikToks the whole time, and you're looking out and you're actually looking for deer, because your window for to see them is like a couple, like minute or two, and I would be asleep or I'd be watching TikToks, and I'm impressed that
YouTube would be.
I mean, it'd be a problem, but like, not to toot your horn, but it sounds like you're literally the whole time, besides glancing at your phone for like the times and stuff, you're literally looking at the beans for hours and hours
just
and hours.
For movement,
just
looking to stand up.
I have ADHD. I don't think that I could honestly do that. So kudos to you. That's
insane.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Telling you what, the last day I was on that bean field, I was sitting there doing my normal thing, which is I mean, honestly, I didn't really have to glass that much with my binoculars, so I could just pick them up with my eyeballs, 90% of the time. So a lot of the time it was just, sitting there and, well, exactly how it sounds, just watching.
Yeah. You'd have to, because it's only a 2-minute window to see that buck.
If you get sidetracked on your phone, you're going to lose it, because he's going to stand up for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Your 30-second TikTok just ruined your whole day,
Wow.
I mean, I got up once to, it was that 8-pointer, but I got up once. I was going to go get a drink of water out of my car, and I was like so paranoid that like something was going to stand up while I was gone. I actually went over to my car and I got some water. I was going to go back to my observation set. And I get to my car, and I had this weird feeling. I stood up on top of my car, and one of those damn bucks was standing up.
Oh, my gosh, of course.
The minute you leave,
It's because they were watching you go to your car to get a water. Like, all right, we can stand up for a second. He's in his car.
Stretch your legs, gentlemen. Stretch your legs.
Everybody's, 3, 2, 1, everybody stand up, and then back down. Crazy.
So I have a couple questions before we wrap it up. I wrote down a couple things that I noticed that you mentioned. So when the bucks that you were chasing, your targets, when they got bumped, I'm curious, how far did they move after getting bumped? And then my next question is, you said that it seemed like every 4th day that deer would be in the beans. Was it a time thing, like every 4 days on the dot, or was it a wind-based thing that he was in the beans?
I can tell you it wasn't a wind-based thing. It was more of just like, that's like where his cycle like ended him up.
Gotcha.
Like
so he was on like a 4-day cycle then, for real.
Yeah. Yes, he was like on a 4-day cycle. There was one time, let's see, whenever we first got on, he was there, and then he got bumped. He skipped a day, and then he was back, and then he started doing his 4-day thing. I saw him 5 times, but I was, like I said, I put 4 stalks on him. Did I answer your question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, they were good. My other question was just how far they generally moved after being bumped.
So, I mean, usually, like with that deer, if he got bumped somewhere in the beans, he would be 70 to 100 yards away from that whenever he showed back up in the beans.
Gotcha. So really not that far.
Not that far, really. No,
not at all. And the other deer that that I knew of like a couple other deer that like they didn't leave the beans no matter what. I don't know if there was like deer that were like avoiding the buck I shot, but it definitely seemed like there could have been a couple more deer that fit in this huge piece of corn, but it just seemed like one or two or both of those bigger ones were in there, and then there was like some subordinate deer which were still nice deer, but they're living in the beans the whole time. Those deer, they did the same thing. They would do a circle immediately after they got bumped, and then like the next day they're probably not going to be exactly where they got bumped, but they're going to be somewhere 70 to 100 yards away on average.
That's crazy.
Yeah, like I mean, the stuff you said, the things you said, like I've heard like about what big bucks do that most people don't believe, but literally like you've gone over the things.
You've checked off every
conspiracy theory about what bucks do.
Mature deer.
Yes,
yeah.
like, and it's just cool to hear, like, the 11 o'clock, they're up, they stand up, they sit down, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You hear all of those things, they're like, is that true or not? Literally, you watched mature deer for 20 days, and like and they were consistently doing, what people say that they do, and that's awesome.
The coolest thing that I found in this podcast, or one of the coolest, was that deer that you ended up killing was only 70 yards off the road.
Yeah.
Because I've been told by so many like well-known bow hunters that sometimes, it's not always, I mean everything's situational, but most guys that are real serious will tell you if you go 100 yards off the road, you've gone too far. And especially in a pressured area.
Yeah.
And it makes sense, dude. But like sometimes you just gotta grit your teeth because you think, I gotta go 2 miles back in this place to get away from pressure. But sometimes them big bucks want to know when the pressure's in there, and that's why
they like to watch the cars park themselves in the morning.
No, for real. Yeah. I mean that's the truth, though. That's why they bed so close to access. So
doesn't Dan Infault call them like the fat girl tree? Like you don't want to be seen in that tree, but that's a tree you got to be in.
Yeah,
it's normally at a parking lot.
Yeah.
I mean, my observation set, I was clearly visible from the road.
I was going to ask you that, how far away your observation sets were from the road, and they obviously weren't very far from the road.
No, it was right there, right next to the road.
That's crazy.
Anybody driving by could see me, sitting there, standing there.
Wow.
They probably thought that crazy out-of-stater.
He doesn't know how to hunt.
He got no clue what he's doing. Old boy's 50 yards off the road, and probably a tree no bigger than your waist. And they're probably just like, this guy, he don't know what he's talking about.
And he's literally, while he's watching 370-inch deer at a time.
It's insane, dude.
That's awesome.
Kudos to you, man.
Quick question: would your first shot have killed the deer?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so gotcha. I end up hitting the deer, middle of the body, and just like a touch lower than I meant to. But it was I don't know, probably about like a third of the way up the body.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, obviously that second shot did him in for sure. I was curious how that first shot went. But that's awesome. That's great. That's great. So,
dude, I appreciate you coming on and I definitely am going to be texting you a little bit more often. I'm going to be a little bit selfish because, dude, you know
how to hunt. That's awesome, man.
I could definitely learn a thing or two from you, and I appreciate it.
I mean, all of us are still learning. It's just like now, like for me, kind of going back to what I said, it's like I almost wish I didn't know, what I know now. It's just like how is this what I saw in Kentucky? How is this going to translate here?
Yeah.
And it's like what I was also saying about, it's like you can listen to a podcast a million times again until you've actually seen something you don't know.
Yep.
I'm listening to this podcast. It was like the first one that Andre D'Acquisto did. And I don't know how many times I've listened to it, but as soon as I got done with Kentucky, I started hearing things that I had never heard before, and I just had to turn the podcast off. I was like, okay, this is too much right now.
One burning question. Are you self-employed? What's going on?
He did say that earlier.
Oh, did he? Okay, gotcha.
Yes, am self-employed. Like I said, still trying to figure it out as far as what I'm doing exactly, but I'm on, basically evenings only, so I'm working just like everybody else right now.
Good deal, man. That's awesome.
Dude, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous. Dude, that's awesome.
Great.
Well, Kev, do you have anything? Or
I'm good. I just I want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and I got a lot out of this, and I'm sure listeners will too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, one more time, Jace, just let everybody know where they can find you or where they can see your platforms and stuff like that.
Sure. My name is Jace Allen. You can find me on Facebook. It's just first name, last name. And then on Instagram, you can search my name or Nature of the Beast. That's my Instagram handle.
Sweet.
Cool.
Well, we appreciate you.
Yeah, very much.
Heck yeah, guys. I appreciate you guys having me on. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, that was a great conversation.
No, that was awesome. Thank you.
For sure.
So, alrighty, we'll stay on here, Jason. I'm going to close it out, and then we can finish up. But
Yep, sounds good.
All right, guys. Doesn't matter what you've done in the past. You can always be born again, and born again is out.
Peace.